All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we just have Cecilia on the phone potentially and viewing the screen, but I just wanted to welcome everyone to our September Spectra Insight meeting. Excited to be here with you guys. My name is Ryan Bingham. I'm actually one of the partners at Spectra Benefits. You'll notice on the webinar it does mention Brent's name, so just not to get too confused. But in case you didn't get the webinar chat, I just want to let everybody know that if you do have any questions during the presentation, since we're a fairly small group, feel free to say something over the phone or send a chat through the webinar feature that's there and available. But thank you again for being with us. It should be a fairly quick webinar, but we do have a fair amount of things to cover, and just based on the setting, would invite you as we go through things, if they are specific to your company or city or where you work and where you handle the benefits for your company, feel free to note those and then reach out to your advisor or relationship manager with our office. We'd be more than happy to help jump in and assist in any way. But as you guys can see from the slide of this title page, our focus today is going to be on ownership as far as your benefits go and getting the employees a little more involved, as well as focusing on high deductible health plans with health savings accounts or HSAs, and some of the strategies that we've seen implement or be implemented and get employees more engaged, and hopefully helping to curb the dramatically increasing cost of healthcare here in our country. So to start off, one of the things that we as a company are starting to see change is the vernacular, or the words and phrases that we use to really get employees more engaged. And so up to this point, one of the things that we oftentimes hear was, getting people more accountable. And what we felt is that oftentimes that may have more of a negative connotation. And so what we've tried to do, at least internally and with our clients and when we meet with individuals, is really focus more on ownership. And so as we have more ownership and we feel like it's part of us and who we are, we tend to take more pride and really take more accountability in a sense, but really ownership in making sure that we have positive outcomes and make things better for not only ourselves but company and everyone around us. And this next slide actually touches a little bit on just reminding us that healthcare is definitely at the top of everyone's list nowadays. It's between that and retirement and saving. But want to let people know that there's a strategy behind it. And so as we talk about things today, you'll notice that there's very specific strategy, or we'd like to refer to it as design, in how we actually implement and make sure that those plans that we have in place make the most sense. Because as you can see from the illustrations here, the money that is spent, really almost all of it is spent directly on healthcare. And so while many think that there's waste, or others that are receiving high profit margins, in reality, a lot of it is going to care about how can we utilize it better, because there's definitely got to be a better way, and we need to all take part of that if we're going to see any change here in the near future. So the first thing that we'd like to really focus on, and just let people know in case these are some of the different contribution methods as an employer that you can implement that maybe you haven't ever considered. And as costs continue to increase, there's different ways of helping the employer, but also the employees in that quest to make things as affordable as possible, but also to maintain the ability for companies to continue to offer a high level of coverage, or at least give additional choice to let employees choose. And so this slide that we've got up right now speaks a lot about two of those methods. The first one is what most are accustomed to, where the company will pay a percentage of the premium, oftentimes very high towards the singles, and then maybe a lower amount for those that have dependents and families. This is great because as costs continue to increase, the company continues to share in on those. It also can be pretty tricky though for employers, and so some of the others that we'll talk about are a little bit different. But one of the things that we're seeing is there's definitely a greater shift towards paying more towards the single and pulling away from some of those families, which definitely can create a burden there. And a lot of it is tied to healthcare reform or the Affordable Care Act or ACA, where there is a minimum contribution that you as an employer, especially those that are over 50 employees, are required to do to make sure that you avoid any penalties. And so if you haven't explored that or not familiar with some of those thresholds and limits, please contact our office. We're more than happy to go through those. But in essence, you need to make sure that as far as a single employee goes, that they're not being charged more than 9.6% of their income for a single coverage on their medical plan. And so we want to make sure first and foremost that you're covered and meeting those guidelines so that you can make sure that you're satisfying those rules and not running into problems there. With some of the increases in costs, the next one that we see oftentimes is more of a defined contribution, and this comes in quite handy when there's a lot of different options that you're offering to your employees. You can see the example here on the slide talks about potentially paying $300 for a single, $500 towards those with dependents, or something similar to that, which is nice because rather than you pick a plan, you put out a dollar amount, and then the employees are able to pick from multiple plan options the plan that suits their needs best and make those dollars go as far as possible. This can be a great way to just help employees see what things really truly do cost and make things more transparent. And as we've seen additional employees have access to more options, they've liked this choice, and it's definitely increased some of the morale there. One thing to make note of, though, is that as you have this defined contribution, some employers will continue that for year after year at that same dollar amount. And as that happens, employees take the full extent of the increase. And so one of the things that we recommend you do is that as costs do continue to go up, that you do revisit that defined contribution just to make sure that it stays competitive. Otherwise, you could have a negative effect down the line. This next slide goes over to another method that we're starting to see more often, and that is the company really wants to focus more on what the employee pays. And so in this example, it talks about $50 for a single, $100 for them and a spouse, $250 if they have a family, etc. And so you're not focused so much on being a percentage or a defined dollar amount that the company pays, but more so we just want to make it easy and know that our employees pay X dollar amount. And a lot of employees really like this, especially in more of the technology space or those industries where you need to be quite competitive, because this will make your benefits plan stand out. That being said, it is difficult and will cost you a little bit more as an employer, but if you feel like that meets the needs of what you're looking for and for your industry, definitely a way that many are looking towards. This next one is more of an income-based. And income-based is definitely not the most broadly practiced option. Typically we see it more for larger companies, but there are some that will base their contribution from a income standpoint, just to make sure that those that have lower income, it's a little bit more affordable for them, whereas those that are maybe more highly compensated will pay a little bit more, but they can probably afford to do that. And so some are taking a look at this. Once again, not the most common option we see out there, but just something to consider, at least get your mind thinking on different ways that might make the most sense for you and your organization. This next slide we wanted to put in there more than anything to make sure that as you consider as your benefit options, you may want to consider offering a high deductible or HSA qualified plan. As you can see from this slide here, we pulled almost 170,000 different companies across the country, and amongst them a number of plan options. And what you'll see across the country, high deductible health plans are offered in about 31% of companies. What you'll notice here in Utah, where the majority of you are located, is that here in Utah, it's very common to see an HSA plan offered. It may not be the only option. In most cases, it is not. But to allow, at least give the employees the ability to sign up for this type of a plan. We'll talk a bit more about what those are if you're not familiar with them here in a moment. But just know that as you look at other Utah employers, offering an HSA is definitely much more common, and would encourage you, if you are not currently, to take a look at offering those. We're big fans of those because, as you'll see from the upcoming slides, they really put more awareness and get employees a lot more engaged in what things cost, and really open up things to be a little more transparent than what your traditional health plans will offer. As we get into some of the next slides, one of the things that we did just want to remind everybody of is that when we focus on healthcare, it can be difficult because oftentimes you have those that have never used their healthcare and continue to pay high premiums, those that use their healthcare quite extensively, and there's really a saying that we oftentimes like to use is that you're only as lucky as your next new hire. And it used to be back in the day, we'd say, how healthy are you, or how healthy is your group, and we'll oftentimes say, how lucky are you, because even with our own internal company, there's been times where maybe 5-6 years ago, we all were perfect health, no dependents had any concerns. But then as time goes on, as you hire new employees, as you continue to grow, those can come up. And so what this graph does is it illustrates that, as you can see in that first column, the top 1%, or really 1% of your population drives about 21% of your costs. And as you continue to increase on that scale, you'll see as you get into the 5%, 10%, 15%, it's really getting into that 80-20 rule where about 20% of your population drives about 80%, if not almost 90% of your costs out there. And so just remember that insurance is definitely one of those things we all pay into a pot or a group of money that allows us, if and when something comes up, that we're taken care of. But just remember that things change from year to year, and to not get too worried, but just know that statistically things do come up, and we all do our best. But what can we do to make sure that we keep things sustainable for the long term? So I just wanted to share that with people because I think a lot of times we forget that. This next graph illustrates really some of the things that a lot of people have questions on, and as you might assume, you can see here kind of the low risk, medium risk, and high risk, and some of the annual medical costs that are involved based on various age groups. As you might assume, in that lower age bracket, even in the high risk category, their costs are fairly low in comparison to those that are more in the high risk, that are in that older age bracket. And so as we continue to age and have some of those things that cause us to be in the higher risk, it definitely increases the cost of healthcare. And so as we talk about some of the things later on, really specific even to diabetes, you'll notice how important it is, especially with your younger population, or those that are in some of those stages and those low and medium risk, that we do everything we can to make sure that we keep them out of that high risk as they continue to age. And so that's not an easy task by any means, but it's definitely one that we need to focus on if we're going to be able to hold costs where they are. As was mentioned before, one of the definite trends that's been out for a number of years now is moving to offer a high deductible health plan, or HSA. And really what that does is it creates a sense of consumerism, to where we as individuals really see a little more about what things cost. It's just kind of ironic. Oftentimes, I'll ask in meetings, how many of you, the last time you went into your doctor, actually knew what you were going to pay at the time of the visit? You might say yes. Well, I do have my my $10, my $15, my $20 copay. But if I ask, well, what did that visit actually cost? I know that's what your copay was, but what was really the cost of that? And really, until we get that explanation of benefits in the mail, we really have no idea. And with only knowing that we're just going to pay a copay on more of your traditional plans, we really don't ask some of those questions. And so, as we introduce the HSA, for those of you that aren't as familiar with it, and talk about some of the concepts tied to it, I wanted to show this illustration here that just reminds us that just the fact of staying fit and keeping our weight under control, we can see a tremendous return because those that there's almost here, like in this illustration, about $1,500 more is spent for those that fall into that obese category versus those that fall or have done everything they can to keep within those reasonable ranges. Also, wellness programs. Some of you are small organizations, and so being able to implement some of those may have been a little more difficult, but just showing that when it comes to wellness programs, really, for every dollar you put in, there's a return of over $3. And so, while that hopefully seems like a lot to all of us, I also want to remind everybody that that's not instantaneous. We like to say wellness programs are only as good as they're implemented, but also maintained and followed through with. And so, just like all of us with those New Year's resolutions, oftentimes we take the time to do really well the first couple weeks of January, but then we taper off, and a lot of the improvement that was made tends to fall back, and we digress. But if we can keep focused on some of those wellness initiatives and keep them and make them become part of our lives and who we are, it'll have a dramatic effect. And so just knowing that as employers, as you continue to invest and do your part, that really will see the pay great dividends down the line. Another one here you can see, which isn't as big of a problem here in the state of Utah, just with our low smoking percentage overall. But just know that from a tobacco use standpoint, costs there are tremendous, especially over the lifetime, as is noted. But just know that there's different things that you can do. It's not as common here in Utah just because of our low tobacco use percentage. But you do have the ability, just like you do with wellness, to implement programs to where you can charge varying amounts for employees that maybe are not participating in your wellness program or are current tobacco users and do not involve themselves in initiatives to help them hopefully quit or make some dramatic life-changing decisions for themselves. The next one here talks a lot about the ER, and I think more and more people are getting accustomed to using urgent cares and some of the other resources out there, but there's still a lot that don't realize that the cost of using the ER versus an urgent care or some other clinics or technology is dramatically different. And we need to make sure that we're using it when appropriate. But some of the statistics state that over 70% of ER visits could have been treated in another environment, which in many times is maybe a tenth or a 20th of the cost. So make sure that we're really allowing employees to be engaged more with that. And then the last one is really, you hear it on the news all the time, especially as of late, but just the importance of utilizing those approved generics and alternatives out there. There's a lot of great resources, and as we continue to do that, that in of itself will cause a dramatic change, especially as new drugs and things come out in the years to come. So from there, you might ask, well, what do I do? How am I going to really make a change? Because getting access to data is very difficult. And so one of the things that I think a lot are not available or not aware of, because maybe they haven't been publicized or they're new, or there are a few cares out there that still don't offer, but what we're starting to see is just about all health insurance cares, and if they aren't, they will be here in this coming year from what has been discussed and released. We'll have some technology that's tied specifically to them, to your health plan, which allows you to actually see more of what things cost. There's a number of tools out there online that you can take a look at that will help out with this, that have some generic data. But what we've seen and seen the most success is that as you implement some of those higher deductible health plans where you're responsible for the total cost of the care until you've met your deductible outside of wellness, is that people will take the time to look at some of the technology that's out there. And there's a few slides here in a moment. We'll go into more detail with that. But what we want to point out is that there are a lot of things that the carriers are offering. You generally need to log into their website and be a participating member. But just in this example here that Brent actually pulled for himself when on his site, for him personally, but he actually pulled up, just something very basic, just an abdominal ultrasound, and just said, well, I just want to see what the range is. And this one, from a dollar standpoint, maybe doesn't seem dramatic. You know, there's some others that are thousands and thousands of dollars, but even for something simple, we wanted to point out that in this specific case, there's a clinic located, you know, here nearby that charges around $118 for this. It just so happens that that same procedure done at the hospital is, you know, almost over $250 more. And really, in reality, it's the exact same technology, machine, everything, but it's where it's done. And so one of the things that this technology is doing is allowing you as a consumer to actually look around. Just like when we shop online nowadays, as we compare retailers, there's a lot of tools out there, and now that we have this from a healthcare standpoint, this will help us make much better decisions. And so would encourage you, if you are not familiar with what your carrier offers or what was short to come, is that you make sure and touch base with your contact here at our office. We're more than happy to help walk you through and let you know what is available to make sure that you and your employees have those tools. Another thing with technology that we're seeing on the rise is the use of telemedicine. And as was just mentioned, a lot of us maybe aren't familiar with the cost of the ER entails, but as you can see from this illustration here, an ER visit averages, around $1,300 in most cases, and many times that's just walking in the door and having a very basic treatment. What the neat thing with telemedicine is that, as was mentioned earlier, there's about 70% of things that we have done in the ER that could have been treated elsewhere. And so there's a number of options out there. A lot of them that we love to promote are the zero consult options. And so this allows the employee or the member, and oftentimes their dependents, to have access to a doctor at no cost. And in some cases, this may be embedded in your health plan or can be purchased separate by you as the employer for a very minimal cost, maybe $4, $5, $6 per month. But what that's doing is enabling the individual to have access to a doctor who can even write prescriptions 24/7 wherever they're at, as opposed to going in and using that ER visit that's costing the health plan over $1,300 in most cases. So outside of the pure cost, but just the ease, the convenience, the employee satisfaction is tremendous on these types of plans. And so if you're not familiar with them, and some of them out there, please get with our office. We're more than happy to help walk you through some of the options available. So going back into transparency and using some of this technology, we want to make sure that we as your advisor, that you're taking the time, or we're helping you take the time to get as many people involved as possible. Because in reality, even if you happen to be on a traditional plan where you just pay a very set small copay for your services, we still want people to be engaged and know what things cost. Hopefully down the line, this will become a lot more transparent, even at the point of service, if you don't have some of those tools or don't have them handy. But what we want to stress here is that employees that have a high deductible health plan or health savings account where they know they are going to pay the entire cost until their deductible is met, or utilize those funds in their health savings account, is that they are 350% more likely to use those tools. And so for us, that's a very telling sign that when it's our money, when we know that we have to get involved, we make much more of an effort. And so as you can continue to encourage your employees to take a look at those, or potentially even move to only a high deductible health plan, you'll be helping enable and encouraging more employees to take advantage of some of those tools, which will hopefully help bring that cost curve down and really change the direction that we're currently going. So just keep that in mind as you're considering whether or not to offer or continue focusing on a high deductible health plan with your company. As we discuss health savings accounts, it used to be that people would say, well, this is truly a cost-saving measure, and our thought or our view is that yes, it can, and hopefully will help change that current trajectory that we are seeing. But we want to make sure that as you're designing and very deliberately creating a direction for your employees on picking what type of a plan, that you do everything that you can to make sure and get employees involved with their costs. And so as you do this with the high deductible plan, we want to make sure that everyone views it in a way that treats it really as equal. So your traditional plan, as you can see in this illustration here, on the left shows your typical plan. You pay your premium. If you need to use insurance, great. If you don't, the insurance company will continue to keep that, and you'll just pay your copays if and when down the line if you need it. With the high deductible health plan, for those that aren't as familiar with them, you'll still have that insurance premium, that maybe is, 15, 20, 10, 15, 20% less than your traditional plan. But really the idea behind it is that rather than just take that money and saving it and not doing anything, was we need to make sure that, either the employee or the employer, or the combination, more importantly, of the two, is taking the time to help fund that health savings account. That health savings account will help them have those funds if and when they need it, so that those regular medical expenses can be paid. You'll still have the catastrophic care, still have everything you need in place, still have great wellness care at no cost, but we really like people to look at it as equals. And so if the premium is $1,000 for a family on the traditional and $850 on the HSA, take that savings and put it into the health savings account. You'll get the tax-free benefit. You'll have that money if and when you need it. It rolls over, can be used on many things outside of just medical costs, but will really help people become more engaged and more prepared for the future, just like they would with a retirement plan. So as we talk about HSAs, one of the things that the employees often ask is, well, how do I do this? What's the best contribution strategy? And so a couple of things we'll go into more detail here. We'll go over this, and some of our recommendations are some of the things that we've seen be successful. We already talked about some of the directions that are going when it comes to contribution, but with the Affordable Care Act, and really with the labor market being as it is, and really being as hot as it is, we want to make sure that there's different things that you can do as an employer. We also understand that there are some employers that this is just part of your culture, and so if you want to continue with it, that is great. But want to make sure that you're aware of it and some of the things that are out there. So one of them is really those that have dual income families, domestic partners, just doing different types of things, are making sure that the dollar amount makes sense. And so as a couple of bullets here, you can see those employers need to make sure that it's affordable, which we already talked about, and really using some of those dollars to stretch and go in other directions. Want to make sure also where it talks about dual coverage. We have a number of employers that have started to implement programs where they may charge a surcharge of sorts, maybe it's $25, $50, etc., for those that want to be double covered. Not that maybe your employer, where you work and your organization feels like from a cultural standpoint that's something you want to encourage, but what we found is that in many cases people just sign up because it's free. And so if you avoid that 100% employer contribution, then you have people that don't just sign up to sign up for it. You have some clients that have maybe double and triple and quadruple coverage based on their circumstance. And what that does is that really pulls away from the those funds that are available to really benefit those that truly need it. And so you just need to decide, does that make sense for you and your company? We also talked a lot about already the defined contribution and just making sure that maybe you charge rather than that 100% coverage, just charge them something, at least so that they can fill it. What I've found over the years is, especially if you go from not charging anybody anything to something, that always causes some discomfort. But if you can do it in bite-sized pieces or from the get-go, if this is the first time you're offering coverage, to at least charge them something, even if it's a small amount, then at least they feel it and they tend to appreciate it more. But more importantly, it doesn't cause a culture of abuse that sometimes can happen. Just kind of a history of ours at Spectra, one of the things that we used to do is pay 100% of the single employee, which was great. Then we give $100 each month to put into their HSA account. We implemented the HSA plan. What we've done this past year is we actually decided, what, we'll continue to offer a great benefit, but we are, just so the employee can get more involved, encourage them to, or have them pay $50 per month, so $25 a check for a single. But then we've gone ahead and increased the HSA account. We also implemented a surcharge, as was mentioned, just to make sure and avoid that additional expense that can come for those that are just signing up and really don't need it at the end of the day. They do have the option, but they will pay a little more for it. But what we found as we did that is that we implemented that surcharge. We had one employee that dropped it, and because they didn't want to pay the extra, say $50 a month or whatever it was, that almost came out to about $5,000 in savings towards the company. In reality, that employee had the coverage that they needed, and it really didn't affect them in any way, shape, or form. There are some that have that double coverage for very specific reasons, but in a lot of cases, that additional premium is really, there's not a benefit there, and there's less that they're getting out for their health care for having that double coverage, and this is a way to maybe deter that if you feel your culture warrants it. Also, as was mentioned earlier, we changed our HSA contribution, increased that, and they're charging employees, but one of the things that we did, or that we found out, is that previously we only had about 6 employees that actually contributed towards their HSA. And while that was great for those 6 that did, we had a number that didn't. But as we changed things and actually required them to actually contribute to their HSA if they wanted to receive the money from the company from an HSA standpoint, so more of a matching, we went from those 6 employees up to 18 plus that actually started to participate and put money in on their own. And so just like you've seen over the years with retirement plans, if there's a carrot or you're encouraged to, if you want to get the match, you need to put some of your own in, it really increases the likelihood that someone will go ahead and put that in. And while it's maybe an increased cost for them as an employee, what it's doing is preparing for the future, because we know at some point the need is going to arise, and this way they can prepare, and we're helping them build. And so we're really trying to encourage, just like we do on a retirement plan, to make sure that all employees are engaged and really participating so that they are successful for years to come and have that money if and when things do come up. This next slide, we won't spend a lot of time on it. You'll have access to this later to go into it, but just shows some of the things that we did, as was just highlighted, and just requiring employees to participate. There are some that that will really appreciate this. There are others that will want to do something slightly different. But I just know, or at least as we've seen of those that have continued to really recommend that the employees pitch in, it's made a dramatic difference, and it's really been a net savings to the company and really helped the employees redirect those dollars into an account that will help them down the road. So here, we've got some other examples, just talking along the matching contribution line, is that, just like on retirement, you may want to say, we'll do every dollar you put in, we'll put in $1 up to, X dollar amount. So the example goes, $50, and then the company would match $50. There's also some that might do a 2 for 1. So you put in 50, we'll put in 100. There's various things that you can do that fit your culture. The only thing we just want to make sure and mention is that the reason why we put up to X per month is that there are those IRS limits. So just make sure as you're planning your strategy that you keep those limits for singles and individuals and those over age 55 in mind, so that you don't set something up that if someone does take advantage of the full match, they go above what is actually allowed by the IRS. But as you can tell, we're really huge fans of this, and we've seen great success and dividends pay out for implementing this methodology. So switching gears a little bit, we want to talk a little more about wellness and just the overall outlook. As you can see here, you've got the cost of diabetes in America and some illustrations and details. But really, $1 in $5 is spent caring for those with diabetes and those things associated with it. And that's a very staggering amount. You can see here just a dramatic cost to us as a country. And as you can see here, there's a number of individuals in that pre-diabetes stage. And so really our goal is, what can we do to help so the individuals don't continue to progress into these stages that become a lot more costly. And so just know that that's a huge thing. And so this illustration here, really helps exemplify what that means. And as you can see, pre-diabetes, from a cost, very minimal on an annual basis. But once they're diagnosed and moving on from there, the costs just increase dramatically. And so whatever we can do to help prevent that, because there are many that are on that borderline, will be a huge thing. And so this might help put into perspective, but this was done a few years ago, back in I believe it was 2008, really just outlined what they projected the cost of diabetes and the spend there would be. And as you can see, it continues to grow in that projection, almost at a 45-degree angle. But what is crazy, and the reason why we like to show this illustration, is at that time, there was definitely an increase in a concern. But what's happened in some of the more recent statistics is that while it said, come 2015, they would expect maybe in the between $150 and $200,000 range, or $200 billion range rather, it's actually ended up at about $322 billion. So their projections were 155, but the fact that it actually accelerated at such a fast pace that now the actual spend is almost $322 billion, that shows what a problem diabetes is and those things associated and tied to it. So, right here, this next slide really goes into the different types for those that aren't familiar with how they work. Obviously, type 1 can be prevented from those things that just, whether through hereditary or other items. But type 2, in just about every case, can be prevented. And so, a lot of it comes down to lifestyle, to maintaining the healthy weight, eating sensibly, that regular exercise. And so those are the types of things that we control. And so where those wellness programs and other initiatives and getting things involved will really make a dramatic difference. And so we wanted to show you on this next slide just some of the statistics, and not to stereotype anybody, but to just show that as you can see here, from these illustrations, with obesity, those that are in those categories, that a lot of it is just really tied to not only income, but also education. And so once again, we're not trying to stereotype, but just knowing that as we focus on different groups and individuals, those that maybe have not had some of the education, those and maybe some of those lower income brackets that maybe don't have some of the resources or whatever it may be to take advantage of wellness, those need to be some of the areas that we focus the most. And so while we need to make sure that all have this and have the opportunity, because it's definitely rampant across all income and education categories, those tend to be some of the highest. And so if you're looking to find a place of where to start, maybe where to focus, this is where we would like to maybe point you in that direction. Also, one of the other staggering things that we find when it comes to plans is, while we mentioned the HSAs include preventive care at no cost, it's very sad to see really what the statistics show, and that for most groups or most companies, less than 30% of the membership or those enrolled in the plan are actually taking advantage of their preventive services. And as we all know, the more we do to maintain, to take advantage of things, catch them early, that will help us in that quest to keep costs low. And and just talking about the diabetes in general, those types of things are going to help set plans to help decrease the likelihood of falling into those categories. What we do also see, though, is that most Utah employers are getting their dependents. And so a lot of that, the area where we have room for improvement is those actual employees or those in the workforce that are not taking the time, whether it's a timing thing, whether it's not being able to get off of work, whatever it is. We need to do what we can to make sure that we're educating and getting them in to do some of those things. And so as we talk about some of these upcoming slides, you'll see some of the things that you may want to implement or at least discuss to make sure that you're getting your employees in for their preventive care service and making sure to educate them. So, as we talk about this, there's a couple strategies we just want to bring up. And so, obviously, controlling costs and keeping people healthy is at the forefront. And so, some of the things, as we discussed, maybe what you want to do is rather than pay 100% of the cost of healthcare or anything along those lines, if that's what you're doing as an employer, look to maybe dropping that, requiring them to pay something, and then really helping encourage or boost that HSA contribution. As you do that, it will see a dramatic change. One of the things that we're going to do as an office is we're actually going to take that and take it one step further, is provide a wellness bonus for those that go in for the preventive care. And so we'll have different things in place. And so as employees, we'll actually charge them a little bit more on the medical, but if they go in and take advantage and have their preventive care and do some of those wellness initiatives that we'll be talking about as a company, they'll actually earn that money back and maybe have some even above and beyond that to help pay for their care. And so at the end of the day, as long as they're doing what they can and being engaged, then they'll pay something very similar to what they have had in the past, or even potentially less. But that way we're getting those that want to be engaged and really want to help control costs, to benefit them. Also, we've got some things with our health plan that we've done that happens to be through EMI Health, but they have an amazing biometric screening program that what's nice about it is it actually gives everybody a rank, or maybe more of a grade is a better way to say it. And so one of the things that we'll be implementing as well is, for anyone that has a B or better, they'll go ahead and get the wellness bonus to help offset and increase what the company pays towards their benefits. However, if they happen to get a B- or less, they'll be encouraged to participate in some monthly coaching sessions or do some things to help them improve and get up into that higher ranking so that they're more healthy and more engaged in doing some of those things to benefit them and their families. As long as they do that, they'll also be eligible for the wellness initiative, but if somebody opts not to do that, they will end up paying more. And so kind of going in line with those that want to take more control, but hopefully this will incentivize people to do some of those things they wouldn't otherwise, which under our current arrangement maybe doesn't entice them or get them to even think about it, just like a traditional plan versus an HSA gets us much more involved as individuals. So once again, I've talked a little bit about some of this, but really just take a look at your current situation. Want to encourage you to take it in baby steps. Think about what makes sense for your culture. But first of all, you need to find what types of dollars are there and available. And we've talked a lot about different ways to maybe reallocate funds for those that are willing to participate versus those that are not. So take a look at what happens there, because that'll be crucial as far as making your initiative successful. And as you do that, do what you can to make the incentives based on outcomes, versus just doing something. And so sometimes, if there's no financial incentive or we don't need an outcome, and it's just kind of like, back in grade school or junior high when you had to run so fast or do certain things in gym class, but you kind of beat the system. Make sure that you're doing something that shows improvement, that does something that really entices them, and and provide, like in this case we've got here, talking about the wellness initiatives, the different things, utilizing the comparison tools, making sure that the people are set up, know how to use all of them, and really providing lunch and learns, and even like this last bullet point, offer initiatives just for attending. And as you do those types of things, you don't have to do maybe something that we've noted here, whether it's more or less, but do something that's actually going to increase that participation so that you get as many people engaged as possible. And whether or not you want to do that for employees or even expand that to spouses or children, that can really take things to the next level. So that was actually all that we have for today that we wanted to go through. Hopefully for those of you that were here to attend, learned a couple of things and hopefully came up with some ideas of things that you may want to potentially discuss with your benefits committee or those in your organization that help make some of those decisions. But would really encourage you to do something, even if it's something small make a difference, and then build upon that each and every year, each quarter, whatever it makes the most sense for you. But as you do that, and as we continue to battle the rising costs, your efforts will make a difference. And would encourage you also, if you do have anybody or have questions rather, or people that you want to make sure get more information, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to do that and hopefully help educate you and make you aware of the things that are available for you and your company. And really appreciate your time and attention and attendance today. So thanks again, and if you have any questions, once again, reach out, and we'll be more than happy to get you more details or even a copy of the presentation if you'd like. So thanks again.